Well, good morning to our friends on the West Coast, and I guess now good afternoon to our friends on the East Coast. This is the latest episode of Ask the Doctor. I'm your host, Owen. Our doctor guest today is Dr. Ben Tapper, and we are going to talk about a couple things, mostly vaccines. There's been a lot of vaccine news out there, and one thing that I think a lot of people in the health world and the Make America Healthy Again world specifically are noticing that Bill Gates has had a lot of influence over vaccines around the world. But what has led to that influence and what has been the result? We want to give a shout out to our friends at the Wellness Company for making this broadcast possible. Remember, go to TWC.health/Owen. That's TWC.health/Owen. Folks, remember, these are the doctors you can trust. They were on the forefront against the push of the COVID injection. They were at the forefront pushing back against the COVID tyranny. These are the people you can trust. Go to TWC.health/Owen for your supplement needs, your health needs, and so much more. We want to thank the Wellness Company for continuing to sponsor this show. All right, Dr. Tapper, let's start with something you actually just said to me before we went live. You said vaccine rates are down. And I feel like it's really important to kind of put some context into that and really even the larger vaccine schedule here, because a lot of people hear that and they kind of think, well, this is a bad thing. We're going in the wrong direction health-wise. Let's provide a little context to that. Why would you say it's good news, or what is the good news that has led to vaccine rates dropping?
Well, there's been massive corruption around this whole topic for decades, first and foremost. We've been trying to bring awareness to this topic. I mean, I personally was censored on vaccinology and vaccines and the corruption around vaccines for decades, and so the government came after me in a big way. They took out violent or valuable information that would save lives. They censored that information. And so the truth is coming to the forefront. I mean, we're talking about, vaccine injuries now more than ever before. We're talking about how the adverse reactions to these vaccinations more than ever before, and it's a real thing. And so the tides are turning. I'm thankful that, the truth is finally coming about. Because I speak for the voiceless. I speak for the people that don't have a voice. And, and what I've seen is massive injury. I've talked to thousands upon thousands of families that have witnessed a vaccine injury. And so, those people are not being heard. And so now their stories are finally, coming to the forefront. We're talking about how these vaccinations are actually causing harm, and that vaccine injury it's real. It's not rare. I mean, look at the ACIP and the CDC. Now they're finally having a black box warning on the COVID vaccine. It's a little bit of a dollar short and a day late here about this whole adverse reaction actually causing myocarditis and turbo cancers. And now they finally have a warning about it. So I'm thankful that the tides are turning.
I want to get back to that black box warning and the COVID vaccines specifically. But, for somebody in your practice, whenever, and I try to avoid doctors as much as possible. Nothing against you guys, obviously. I just want to stay away from hospitals. But whenever I'm in a situation like that, they ask about, oh, well, what's your vaccine history? And when I tell them I'm not vaccinated, they seem to be stunned. It's like their jaws hit the floor. They can't even believe it. It's almost like sometimes they take it personally, like it's an attack on them that I haven't had a vaccine. And how do we kind of reset that mindset? It's like we're seeing it right now as far as the public is concerned, but how do we reset that as far as the doctors are concerned, as far as the medical industries are concerned, as far as the healthcare providers, everybody at the hospital? How do we get to reset that? Because that's much deeper than the public that can kind of just maybe be swayed by some information or by some experience.
Well, again, you have to look at continuing education for most MDs is paid for by, Pfizer. It's paid for by this continuing education is all pharmaceutical influenced. And so it's really uprooting the whole paradigm around vaccinology. I mean, they go to med school, they're taught that, hey, this is saving lives. But the thing is, we have to really unlearn what we learned. And, it's I believe it was Mark Twain that said, it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you believe to be true that just ain't so. I mean, we have to uproot a whole belief system and indoctrination that was pushed for many, many years, all the way back to the smallpox and polio. The history around these vaccinations has literally been around deception and manipulation of information, and that is it's corrupt. So, we just have to unlearn what we have learned, and really, you're seeing this massive campaign now around. Oh, you see all these, third-party entities saying, "No, we stand by vaccinations; they're safe and effective," and it's like this religion around this topic, and so this is why it's such a spiritual and psychological component, because people, it is a religion. You start questioning these vaccinations, and people's heads explode. It's like, oh, the hepatitis B vaccine, they took it off the market. They're like, oh, people are exploding. Like, do you realize that this is a sexually transmitted disease? We could pre-screen the mothers for it. We don't have to put the baby in harm's way. This vaccination has been shown to have neurological issues. MS has been correlated to hepatitis B. We don't have to put the baby in harm's way. Not only that, there's 250 micrograms of aluminum in this vaccine, which is 10 times the normal safe limit from the EPA, and this is right in the vaccine. And we're injecting it right into a baby when a newborn, and then you have people, you have pharmaceutical tyrants that are saying, "Oh, it's safe. The aluminum in there is safe. It's good for the body." Aluminum is not a nutrient, especially. There's been a mountain of literature that talks about how this aluminum, the nanoparticles in there, actually goes to the brain and affects the nervous system, which can hinder developmental stages and actually cause neural development delays and demyelination and degeneration, and I can go on and on. So again, going back to your question, it's a psychological uprooting that needs to happen.
Well, and there's so much science on what you just described, and this is where I think RFK Jr. and the administration is trying to apply a lot of pressure. I think there's been a lot of pushback, but when you talk about the heavy metals in some of these vaccines, you talk about them causing autism, you talk about the neurological problems. It's obviously well known that the blood-brain barrier in a boy is smaller than in a girl, and so that's why these things. I think the theory is, I think there's science to back it up, that the reason why boys have a higher rate of autism is because they're more susceptible to these heavy metals penetrating the blood-brain barrier.
Yep.
And so this is the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that a doctor and a parent, when it enters that conversation in those very intimate moments, when you have a new child or a first child, those are the things that kind of will reshape that conversation, and maybe have a parent saying, well, wait a second, I'm not sure I want to inject my newborn baby. I'm not sure I want to inject my infant with a heavy metal, right? It's like, oh, we're here, we're fighting disease. Hey, that sounds great. Okay, well, wait a second. Do you want to inject your baby with a heavy metal? So it's kind of like, we have to kind of rephrase these things to get people's minds thinking and raise the awareness levels about what's actually in the shot.
100%. I can't agree more with you. This is the thing. If the parents really knew what the ingredients were in these vaccines, there's not a single nutrient, first and foremost, in these vaccines. It's almost like witchcraft. I watched a really good video put on by the Children's Health Defense. They're like, oh, it's like the witch's brew. It's like, oh, you got a rabbit's tail and the blood of a monkey and all these things, and just mixing it in there.
That actually might be more trustworthy, Doc.
Yeah, right. And they stir the pot, and it's like, let's inject in these newborns. It's like, the metals is just tip of the iceberg. I mean, look at the different. I mean, you got SV40. I mean, you got MDCK cell line, which is Medine Darby K9 cell line. It's a kidney cell from a Cocker Spaniel that they put in the flu shot and other vaccines out there, and it's in there. And if parents really knew, oh, you got Cocker Spaniel cell lines. I mean, think of the grocery store. You go to the grocery store, hey, go get me some mustard. But you look at the ingredient list of the mustard, and you got MDCK cell line on there. Medine Darby K9 kidney cell. What the heck is that? That's the Cocker Spaniel kidney cell in your mustard. No thanks. I'm going to pass on that one. Why on God's green earth do we think that needs to be injected into a newborn? Literally, this is witchcraft, and it's bizarre to me that we put these in the body. But I digress. But if parents really knew the ingredient list, I think that it would cause a revival in the vaccine world overnight.
Well, and it goes back to what we said, and what you brought up is that the vaccine rates are declining. And I think that's because the information levels are going up. I think more people are looking into the ingredients. I think it also applies to the food on the shelves. You bring up the ingredients in your favorite mustard. I think people are starting to maybe even read the ingredients in the foods and saying, wait a second, I can't even pronounce that.
Yep.
I'm not sure I want it in my body, let alone I'm not even sure if I can even say what it is. But you talk about it being a religion, and this is the one thing that I've noticed, and it's probably worse for you because you're actually in the field. But it seems like, and we really saw this with the COVID tyranny, we really saw this with the COVID vaccines. When people find out that you want to make your own health decisions, and that's really what it is, but when people find out, hey, I didn't take this vaccine or I've never taken any vaccine, there's almost this like vitriolic response and anger. And it's almost like they want you hurt. It's almost like they want you to get sick so they can point the finger at you and say, it's your fault. You should have been part of my religion.
Oh, yeah. And this is a slippery slope. And you'll see government officials say this, that, I believe in freedom, but I don't believe that you have the right to infect others by not vaccinating. We saw that during COVID, which is a slippery slope when you have politicians that believe that kind of a perverted mindset of thinking. They think they can justify, passing legislation to hinder our rights and freedoms in the name of vaccine safety. Because, you're unvaccinated, you're going to cause other people to get sick. And it's like, well, if the vaccine works, why are you so afraid of, then it's like, oh, the unvaccinated are getting sick and they're the ones to blame. And, you see that throughout, the vaccine history. There was I believe a high school in Minnesota back in the 80s, and they had a measles vaccination campaign there. And, there were 6 kids that didn't get the measles vaccine. And they had a massive measles outbreak in the school. And just so coincidentally, all the people that got the measles vaccine got measles. And it was the 6 kids that didn't get the measles or the vaccine didn't get measles. But they blamed the 6 kids. They're like, see, it was them. People, we need to understand that there is a vaccine-induced measles, okay? And so we need to understand that. But this the whole theory around herd immunity, that's a falsified really thinking. It's bad science. It's more herd mentality than anything. I've never been vaccinated ever, and I'm here. I'm healthy. I've never vaccinated my children, and they're healthy. And I get that all the time. How are your kids so healthy? Why are you, what are you guys doing? I'm like, well, we don't vaccinate first and foremost. They hit their milestones. They're healthy. They're vibrant. They might get colds here and there, but again, we trust the body's immune system. We give the body what it needs, and if we do get sick, God forbid, we have things that we can take to help the body to fight these things, and we don't have to fear disease. Again, I grew up in a household where we had zinc and probiotics and vitamin D and different things, and we didn't fear the fever. I had 106 fever as a kid. My dad's like, he gave me zinc and probiotics and fasted.
106.
Yeah, 106.
You got to be like a record holder for that. Have you submitted this to the Guinness Book of Records?
Yeah, right. It was a crazy fever, and I felt miserable. I felt like I was dying on the couch, but the fever broke. My dad didn't panic. He was calm as a cucumber. And I remember doing that same thing with I was out in the mountains. We got caught in a snowstorm out in the mountains in a cabin in the mountains, and my little guy he had 106 fever, and I just put my hands on him, prayed on him, and then my wife was kind of panicking, but the very next day his fever broke and he was good to go. So again, fever is a good thing, but it can be a bad thing. And if it goes surpasses that 106, I don't recommend like, hey, just completely neglecting him if he's got a 106 fever. But it's one of those things where not to panic. That's step one, and trust that the body can heal itself. And there is a time and place to interfere, but I try not to interfere. 106 is my max. If you go to 107, I probably would have taken to the hospital.
Well, and so much of what you just said used to kind of be, I think the general practice was it's like, all right, don't panic, right? Let's just not panic. Let's wait and see. Let's monitor the situation and let's let the body work. We have
Amen.
a miracle. It's called the immune system. And
Amen.
we've done so much damage to it that it's almost like we're becoming reliant on big pharma. That's a whole nother conversation perhaps we can get into. And there's 2 things I want to say. I want to ask you about, because you talked about your kids not being vaccinated. This is a huge story for me that I talk to other parents like that, or even myself. But, you just said something that when I went through the whole COVID thing, when you understand what the propaganda is designed to do, it's so much easier to identify it and not be affected by it. But I could understand, I'm assuming I got COVID. I never got tested, but I never get sick. And I got about as sick as I'd ever been in early January of 2020. So let's assume it's COVID. It's a novel virus. My immune system isn't ready for it. So I get it. and I'm never sick. So I'm in bed. I'm pretty sick, like 5 days. I mean, really bad. Can't really get out of bed. And I'm thinking, if I didn't have the confidence in my immune system, or maybe better yet, if I was falling for the TV propaganda, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, right? It's like, look at all the red alerts, look at all the death tolls, and they're running it 24/7. Like, if I didn't know any better and I'm on day 2 of this and my temperature is 103 or whatever it is, I'd probably panic. I'd probably go to a hospital. And then guess what happens? They put me on a ventilator. They blow my lungs out. Hospitals are where 99% of the death took place. So it's like, just having that confidence of mind, just having that confidence of immune system literally could have saved your life in
100%.
2020.
100%. And you hit the nail on the head. And I'm glad you said that. Yes, most of all deaths occurred in the hospital due to the faulty protocols. Remdesivir, people call that drug run, death is near. I mean, I think we need to investigate that drug. They knew full well the track record of the drug had a history of causing renal failure, all these other issues. And the patients that were on remdesivir, it caused massive problems. It wasn't just the first round of remdesivir. It's usually around the second round of remdesivir is when people had massive issues and then when the death occurred. And so, but they blamed on COVID. They're like, oh, it's COVID. And, people that stayed home, that didn't fear this and that took, vitamin I or hydroxychloroquine, they got better and they responded without having, the true hospital intervention. And people were panicking. Like, this is why I called this a psychological warfare, spiritual warfare. They're pushing the death count. If you remember, I remember Owen taking my wife to dinner. And they had all these TVs around. They had this constant death count being pushed on the televisions, like 300,000 people died, and it just kept this death ticker. I mean, what is that going to do with people that believe this and to see that, like, oh, like you get a cold and people would panic. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when germophobia used to be a mental disorder. And during COVID, it was like, it was like a virtue, like hand sanitizer this, hand sanitizer that. And people were so panicky. I'm just like, oh my goodness, where is the world gone? We've gone mad. The common cold, you couldn't just sneeze or cough and without people having a panic attack. But again, it's just wasn't healthy. But again, that's why it was a psychological warfare operation being pushed on the people.
It's so crazy when you try to relive that. It almost feels unreal, right? It's like, we actually went through that, but it was like a different world. I don't know. There's definitely a psychological mechanism in the brain that you can't control, that it's like, if you go through a hardship or a trauma like that, there's something that wants to separate it from the rest of your life. I've experienced with that some other things, but man, I mean, 2020 was the year of, like, holy smokes, I'm living in la la land. This is crazy. But the key word here, or the key phrase is don't panic. And so if you're listening to this and maybe you're afraid, you're hearing the news about the flu season, maybe the flu is going around, people are getting sick, don't panic. Don't panic. And if you want to build your immune system, there's a good way to do it right now at TWC.health/Owen, TWC.health/Owen. And that is, as you can see, the immune defense and nasal throat sprays. It looks like you guys got it on sale right now. So doctors are obviously warning the flu season is going to be a rough one, just like they always do. They want you to go out. They want you to take a vaccine. But the truth is, the vaccine is already outdated, folks. Quite frankly, it's expired, really, for its purpose. And so you, though, can build your immune system with the Wellness Company. And why not go with the doctors we know we can trust? Step 1. Prevention through immune defense, nasal and throat sprays. Use daily to help support your body's first line of defense. Right where the viruses enter, your nose and your mouth. Step 2, early treatment through the Contagion Emergency Kit. Physician-prescribed antiviral options, including a nebulizer, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin. Those things that work, they tried to ban. So treatment can start early if you do get sick and you're not stuck in long lines or shelling out big money at urgent care during the holidays. This isn't fear, it's common sense. Get prepared now. TWC.health/Owen, TWC.health/Owen, and use promo code Owen for 10% off. Promo code Owen for 10% off, not just on this, on other things too. But folks, those medical emergency kits, I can't emphasize this enough. Those things are incredible. To me, it's a must-have in your health. They have all kinds of different options there. Go check out their medical emergency kits. Again, to me, that's just a household item that you have to have. And if you don't have it, I think you're nuts. So Dr. Tabbert, you brought this up, and I love this conversation. I've seen it with some of my friends and family. I like to even say maybe I'm the science because I'm not vaccinated too, like yourself. But the children, when we went through 2020 and 2021, it really hit me that, okay, parents are going to go one of two directions here, right? They're either going to go into the direction of the propaganda-based fear, or they're going to go in the direction of, okay, I need to be more aware and knowledgeable about healthcare than I've ever been. And in this kind of split, we saw it's like, whoa, I have a feeling that in like 5 to 10 years, you're going to have like two different classes almost of kids. You're going to have kids that are growing healthy, maturing at the right biological ages. Their immune systems are functioning right. They're not sick all the time. All of these other things. And then the people that kind of go with that propaganda-based fear, they're basically going to put their kids into the pharmaceutical industrial complex to keep them a client of keeping their business going for years. But they're going to be the ones that are sick, having immune problems, maybe growth problems, other biological problems. Are we starting to see that yet? I ask you because you said you're not vaccinating your kids. Are you starting to see that kind of divide happening right now?
I mean, I've been seeing it since I've had children, to be honest with you. I've seen the contrast. I mean, just in my circles, we hang around homeschooled kids that are typically unvaccinated. So we do have that, I would say, the control group, and the contrast is very apparent. You can see it. These children are healthier. They're more vibrant. They're sick less often. It's just, even on autoimmune or gut imbalances, sensory issues, it's just non-existent. You don't see it. And so it's there. I mean, look at even the Amish community. Dr. Noonan was an MD in Pennsylvania. He worked for, I think, 3 decades, treated the Amish community. And he would even say, like, the Amish do get sick here and there, but he's like, they didn't vaccinate, and they didn't have the neurological problems. They didn't have the autism. They didn't have these issues. And it was very real for him. And this is, again, going to clinical data, clinical observational data. We see that the data is very clear. The unvaccinated are healthier. They're sick less often. They have less neurological developmental delays, disorders, demyelination, degeneration. It's a real thing, and the data is clear, and we're seeing that. And so going back to the contrast, if we took all the unvaccinated children, we're going to see that more and more now because people are waking up to this. So the vaccination rates are dropping, which is a good thing. We're seeing less people vaccinated and waking up to this. And so you're going to see more contrast. You're going to see, I mean, look at this. Like, I think it was 8 to 9 years ago, the CDC changed the milestone of crawling. They took crawling off as a milestone, and that's one of the most prominent milestones for the nervous system. I mean, it's a slap in the face for every pediatrician that deals with the nervous system or, tries to optimize the nervous system of these little ones. And we understand that when these infants are crawling, when these babies are crawling, that's a massive milestone for neurodevelopment and for the curves of the spine, for neuroplasticity. And they just up and took it off as a developmental stage. Why? Because we understand that there's developmental delays that are occurring at a rapid rate through vaccinations. Why? Because we have more metal toxicities. Metal is a neurotoxin. It's going to slow the developmental stages down. So they're trying to hide the fact that this is causing problems, and it's really evil. So again, yes, we are seeing it. It's just a matter of if you are in those circles to see it or not. But it is very apparent in my world.
Well, there is a Bill Gates element to this next topic of conversation, but we can kind of start with what you mentioned earlier, what we witnessed during COVID, and maybe specifically the protocols inside the hospital that I believe were responsible for most of the death, actually. I don't know if I would say it was 99% of the death that happened in hospitals, but I'd say it was probably the majority was the protocols. You mentioned one, remdesivir, but it was a lot of different protocols. It was the blowing out of the lungs with the ventilators and everything else. Do we need, I look at this and I'm saying crimes were committed. Crimes were committed against humanity. Whoever made the virus in the lab, whoever came up with these protocols that got people killed. I mean, it's a little delicate thing, right? We want to be able to to do things when there's an emergency like this and not have doctors afraid to provide treatment that it, can come back and haunt them if they get something wrong. But at the same time, this felt like it was predetermined. This felt like it was pre-coordinated. What do we need to do here as a country, or maybe more specifically, the healthcare field and doctors? What do we need to do to restore the trust or the faith in these institutions that lost it all during the COVID years?
That's a good question. I question whether or not we even trust the government entities in these three-letter organizations at all. I mean, Thomas Jefferson stated that, if the people let the government decide what foods they eat, what medicines they take, their bodies will soon be in a sorry state as old souls who live in our tyranny. We need to shift away from our faith in government top-down protocols like Fauci, these administrative doctors that are pushing. We need to give authority to the practicing physician. I mean, the true physician is the one who's a practicing physician, the one that's in the field, in the trenches, serving people, getting people well. I mean, what did we learn during COVID? The doctors who were prescribing ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, getting these patients well, getting them better, they're responding just fine without going to the hospital, that we're not following orders from top-down administrative doctors. They went against the grain and they were persecuted for it. I believe biblically, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed, I believe those doctors are the true physicians, the one that stood in the gap, the ones who were willing to go against the grain here and do what was right. I mean, if this was one of the greatest pandemics of our time, shouldn't we come together and throw everything we know at this disease, but not persecute the doctors that might have a different way of going about it, that were getting good results and better outcomes than the vaccine? I mean, but no, that's why it was an agenda. Like, that's why we call this the plandemic, because it was brought in, it was an agenda. Look at the bills prior to 2020, Owen. If you look at the vaccine bills, I mean, we started Nebraskans for Medical Freedom in 2017. We saw these draconian bills coming our way to take away our rights to refuse a vaccine or a pharmaceutical. We saw massive manipulation of data in the National Vital Statistics System from the CDC. The flu up and disappeared, but they're like, oh, it's because everybody's social distancing and wearing masks, and that's why it's going away, right? Wow. But that's what, there was a clear agenda here. This was make no mistake, the plandemic. And we can go down conspiracy rabbit holes all you want. I mean, look at Event 201, which was a dress rehearsal in the fall of 2019, prior to even knowing anybody knew about COVID-19. This is why it was a giant dress rehearsal, plandemic, and make no mistake, it was brought in to bring in the vaccine.
Don't worry about, don't avoid conspiracy theory on this show. We're all in.
Yeah, good. Well, good. Then I'm in good company, because, I was labeled one of the biggest conspiracy theorists in 2020, and it's comical. I'm like, all I was doing is blowing the whistle.
The thing about us conspiracy theorists is eventually we just turn out to be right.
Yeah. What 6 months usually? Is that the time?
I feel like it's shrinking. It used to be like 10 years, and then it was 5 years, and then it was 2 years, and then 1 year. Maybe we're like 6 months now. Yeah. I don't know.
2 days, maybe. Yeah, it's happening. But yeah, it's, again, it's, look at Event 201. People, if you watch that, it messes with your brain. You're just like, what is it? This isn't COVID. This is a dress rehearsal. This is a simulated event. It was so well done, and it had military precision, and so it makes you wonder. And it goes to show you how powerful these entities are, these three-letter organizations and these big government entities. But again, we need to run from that, and then restoring trust in the government. I think, putting trust in the government is how we got in that problem in the first place. So I think we need to really go back to the greatest minority of in healthcare, and that's the individual, and that is the physician. Going back and restoring trust within the physician, those who are willing to stand in the gap and those who stood in the gap. And I think finding those physicians and giving them vindication is really important as well.
Well, and not only that, giving you guys a voice and a platform. That's why I started this show, Ask the Doctor, because I agree, the doctors that stood in the fray and really risked their careers, you could say. They risked their careers. You guys risked your careers standing up for the truth and what was right during the plandemic, the scamdemic. And now you guys have teamed up and you formed the wellness company where people can trust products that you guys have. There's so many great products there. But that's why I started this show, was to make sure that these doctors have a voice, have a platform. And I mean, God forbid, if there is ever, which I think we probably will go through something similar eventually, if there's ever another thing like COVID, so we can have a platform for you guys to get the truth out against all of the propaganda. And this leads me back to Bill Gates. You know, I'd like to think, and maybe as you grow older, you kind of lose this mentality of giving people the benefit of the doubt, or expecting that everybody's acting in good faith. It seems like maybe the longer you live, those things start to kind of fade away. But I look at Bill Gates, and he's trying to vaccinate the world, and he's got all these different vaccine programs and his weird little mosquito experiments. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, well, okay, if Bill Gates is really some arbiter of world health, and Bill Gates really cares about the health of humanity and all this stuff, then there would be other things that he would be doing, and he probably wouldn't look like an old fat fish himself. But regardless, there'd be other things that he'd be doing. So I see it, and I'm like, well, what is this deal? He's just obsessed with these injections and these vaccines. It's just weird to me. And then we find out that a lot of the places where Bill Gates was pushing vaccines ended up causing pandemics like polio in Africa.
100%. Yep. They use live attenuated viruses and caused, like, again, vaccine-induced measles, vaccine-induced polio. But yeah, Bill Gates, you're saying he's not a philanthropist? The philanthropist that the media portrays him? Oh, yeah. He thinks the world's overpopulated. You want to go down rabbit holes. That's why I think this whole vaccine was a bioweapon to cull off the population. And the governments, it's scary when they think that they need to fix these outbreaks by culling off animals and the ostriches in Canada, and, culling off of herds of animals and farm animals because of these diseases and disease outbreaks. I mean, that's a slippery slope when the government thinks that's the solution. What are they going to do to the human population when we get diseases? And Bill Gates is one of those people. I mean, his dad had a hand in Planned Parenthood, and and he was pushing that. And so I think some of that belief system got pushed on to Mr. Bill. And he thinks the world's overpopulated. So it's a scary thing when he's investing into our farm industry or food industry and the vaccine industry. What's the agenda behind that? What are his intentions? And now he's pushing a $1.2 billion investment to end polio. Make no mistake, Bill Gates does not invest that kind of money without an expectation of a return. He's going to have more government influence in that area, and he's trying to buy influence in the health field, and that's what he's doing. He's dropping $1.2 billion to have influence and have a say in with these vaccinations in the healthcare system. Make no mistake, he's playing chess here, and we need to be on high alert for people like him, villains like him, because he's going to have an influence with this vaccine and he's going to cause harm with it. Make no mistake. Look at this vaccine now, Owen. We know, that this vaccine is causing harm. It has caused massive death, and these people they're not even batting an eye. And it's like it's like this argument. Well, this vaccine's safe and effective. It saved millions of lives. It saved more than it hurt. And really, the truth be told, I believe this vaccine has caused astronomical harm. We have more injuries in the vaccine events reporting system in the last 4 years than the last 30 combined. So what does that tell you? That this vaccine is a bioweapon. It is designed to cause harm, more cardiovascular issues than ever before. And Mr. Bill Gates is behind it, and really he should be behind bars. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, I don't think he'd be alone in that jail cell if we ever decided to get justice for all of those crimes. And
Right.
it's funny too, because if people, and I have this a lot when I'm having debates on any given topic, but let's say somebody wants to push back against you and they say, "Oh my gosh, how could you say the COVID vaccine was a bioweapon?" It's like, that's outrageous. How could you say that? And so one of the things I like to do when I have a disagreement on, let's say, what led to something, let's say the cause, but I say, okay, well, maybe you don't believe that was a weapon. Maybe you don't believe that was part of some population control agenda on planet Earth, which I'd say there's plenty of evidence for. But fine, maybe you don't believe that. The result is still the same. Whether you believe that's the case or not, the result was still the same. We had more vaccine deaths and damages than ever in our country's recorded history. And who knows what that's like nationwide, or worldwide, but just the little nationwide study that you brought up shows that the vaccine deaths right after COVID skyrocketed, literally went off the chart. So it's like, even if you don't believe that this was a planned bioweapon or population control, the result still is the same. So let's address the result then. Well, what are we being done? Where are all the apologies? I'm seeing little to no apologies for the safe and effective tours. I'm seeing little to no apologies from all of these mainstream news networks that you're supposed to trust, and
Mhm.
their doctor guests that you're supposed to trust. Where are the apologies for the safe and effective? Where are the apologies for all the pressurized propaganda to get you go out and take one of these shots? There are no apologies. There's no guilt. There's no apologies. And so, in my opinion, I think we need COVID. I think we need COVID tribunals. I think we need to do a major overhaul of that entire rollout and
Yes.
investigate the people that were the biggest pushers of it. Because really, doctor, and this is what it comes down to, we need to make sure that we don't let this happen again. We can't
Yep.
let somebody make a virus in a lab. We can't let that virus then affect the planet. And then we can't have a coordinated response to that that's even more damaging than the virus itself.
Yes. 100%. Well said, Owen. And we need Nuremberg 2.0. And this is the reality of the situation, that these people they're going off the hook. I mean, look at the last pardon that Biden signed in his last hours of presidency was for Fauci. I'm like, wow, the dude, we shouldn't take health advice from a dude that just got pardoned. I mean, think about how the craziness of it. I mean, common sense is not so common. I mean, for crying out loud, literally millions of Americans, people around the world, took health advice from a dude that needed a pardon. Um, what does that tell you about the health advice that he was giving to people? What about the protocols? And again, there needs to be justice here. And you're right. Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, they need to be on the trials. Fauci, Bill Gates, all these people pushing this agenda. Not only that, I mean, they came after me and Bobby Kennedy, all these other people that were part of the disinformation dozen. They labeled me one of the disinformation dozen during the pandemic. They said I was responsible for 65% of the misinformation on vaccinations. And I was like, dang it, I'm shooting for 100%, but that's a different story. But the reality is they came after me. They deplatformed my accounts. My accounts were reaching 3 to 4 million people a month. They wiped them all clean. I had six different accounts on Instagram. They seized my accounts. They took my money. All these different things. And they slandered me in the media. They said I was a conspiracy theorist and people shouldn't be listening to me. And all I was doing is trying to blow the whistle and bring awareness on the truth of the matter here, that the government is lying to the people. The government is manipulating data. They have faulty protocols. We should not trust this vaccine. This vaccine technology has never been seen before. Look at the contract with Pfizer in 2012 and 2013, how they had genome altering therapeutics in the form of a vaccine contract with DARPA. This is a real thing, and people need to investigate and question it and not just parrot the TV. And God gave you a brain. We need to think critically here and look through the lenses of observation. What are we learning here? We just can't trust the propaganda being pushed through the television and in radio and media, but we need to think for ourselves and question this, question the motives, question the narratives here. I mean, I watched the health director of Chicago say, I don't question what's in it. I just roll up my sleeve and get it. You should do the same thing. And I'm like, people, how dumb can you be? We're not lab rats here. And again, it was so, how do you say it? Evil. There's no other way to put it. It was just pure evil. And it really showed a lot of people's IQ during this whole thing. And so again, there needs to be justice. And I pray that that we will see justice on this side of heaven. I really do. I really pray that these people get what they deserve, and because it cost millions of lives. It wasn't COVID. Again, it was these top-down protocols, and it was the vaccine. I mean, how many people? I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, Owen, that talked about how they have injuries from the vaccine. People that were just dropping dead. Healthy people in their 30s. Late 20s, how many athletes just dropped dead suddenly, died suddenly because of cardiovascular issues that we've never seen before? I mean, it's a real thing, and people need to start asking questions. And more importantly, we need justice.
Well, and also the COVID protocols and response did permanent damage to our economy. That's perhaps a different conversation. But that Anthony Fauci pardon is apparently null and void now. That's what we're being told, that it's null and void. So maybe there's an opening there. But when you get into the censorship and the attacks that you endured in that period of time, to me, this is like one of the strongest cases to make about why censorship is so dangerous.
Oh
And
yeah,
if we wanted to go down the conspiracy theory route, we could easily do that and say, you were stopping their agenda, whatever the agenda was. You were in the way of the agenda, and so you had to be silenced, right? But okay, let's just look at it. Let's look at it not through a conspiracy theory lens. Let's just look at it through a black and white lens. You were censored in that period of time. You were right. Everything that they were censoring, all that information and the reporting and everything that you were doing, you ended up being right. So what are we talking about? We're talking about we were silencing the doctors and we were censoring the voices that actually got it right.
Amen.
And so it's like, this is why you can't do censorship. And
Yes.
even if you might say it in the middle of a time that things are hostile and we're concerned, whatever, we have to understand, hey, this guy might sound crazy and maybe he is crazy and maybe he's wrong, but maybe he's not. What
Right.
if he's not? What if he's right? And it's like, there is the perfect example. The people that they silenced and censored, they got it right. And
Yep.
that's why we have to look at this and say, we can never do it again. We cannot censor and silence dissident opinions or different opinions because you never know, they might be right.
That's it. You know, George Martin said when you cut a man's tongue, you don't prove him a liar, but you are fearful of what he has to say. You know, and, you know, I believe censorship is evil. I believe censorship is the tool of the tyrant when the lie loses its power. And so it's a real thing. And like you said, it's, you know, it's not the good guys censoring, especially in history. And history has showed us that it wasn't ever the good guys that used censorship to silence, you know, dissenting voices. And that's what happened during COVID. They didn't like what we had to say, so they used everything in their power to silence us. And people need to understand too, the pandemic treaty. I'm not sure if you ever looked into that, the verbiage in that pandemic treaty from the WHO, but they said that, you know, they want full authority in the next pandemic, and they want full authority when it comes to you know, for the American people to give up their rights in the next pandemic, and they want to have full authority. And I read some of the verbiage in there, and they said that they would use any authoritative means necessary to silence those that are speaking out against their narratives or their motives, or health advice. And that includes disinformation. And that would have meant that, that included me. I'm like, what are they going to do? They wouldn't just delete my accounts or censor me. They'd probably put me behind bars and say that I'm a threat to public health. And I think if we don't do something, if we don't stand up, and if we don't really be proactive in this fight, that might be here. Again, medical tyranny is at our doorstep. And if we stay complacent, we're going to let them in the door. I mean, Edmund Burke said the only thing for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And so complacency is the enemy, and that's what they want. They want us to be complacent, but we need good men to stand, and we need good men to really be proactive here.
And the good men and women at the Wellness Company, you guys have done so much. Again, folks, TWC.health/Owen. And if you don't have an emergency medical kit at home, I just got to ask you why. What are you doing? How do you not have an emergency medical kit at home? And a lot of people, maybe they think to themselves, hey, I'll just go out, I'll buy some Band-Aids, maybe some topical ointment, stuff like that. No, go with the experts you can trust that have put together multiple options for you, by the way, TWC.health/Owen. Multiple options for the medical emergency kit that you want to have in your home, from the basic medical emergency kit to the contagion emergency kit that we just talked about, the first aid emergency kit. Again, these are things that are just household items. The field emergency kit, if you really want the whole kit and caboodle, it's all at TWC.health/Owen. Make sure you have a medical emergency kit at home, folks. You can look at each one of these and you can find out the different things that come inside, which one works for your household or yourself personally. But have a medical emergency kit at home. Don't go out and try to put one together yourself. Trust the people that stood in the face of tyranny at the Wellness Company. Go to TWC.health/Owen and use coupon code Owen, and you can get an additional 10% off TWC.health/Owen. And just browse their entire product line there. It's actually extremely expansive. It's incredible what you guys have been able to do. And so I want to kind of bring it back here to what we were just talking about. And I think that it was a window into how corrupted the medical institutions had become with COVID. But I think when you do a deeper dive into it, you realize that that's really not where it began. That's really not the beginning of the corruption inside of the medical institutions and the protocols and everything else. It looks like this has been going on forever. Whether you agree with it or not, as I say, the results are the same. This country has an epidemic of obesity, chronic disease, diabetes, all of these things. it's all bad health. It's all bad health protocols for a country that spends the most money on healthcare, doctor.
Right. I mean, 80% of Americans are suffering with a chronic disease associated with poor lifestyle choices. Again, things need to shift. We need to really make America healthy again. We need to, and what does that look like? We've been neglecting the truth for so long. Our food industry is completely broken. We're fed by this industry that pays no attention to health, and our health industry pays no attention to food. So there's a disconnect there. We need to really eat well, move well, think well, pray well. We can be well. And we're neglecting those major pillars. People aren't moving. We sit on average 8 hours a day. And movement's one of the most powerful and underutilized antidepressants. And, it stimulates 90% of this nutrition and stimulation of the nervous system and the brain. Movement's a medicine, and we're just not moving again. So things are neat. Things are turning, but we need to really get back to the basics of health. And I think ever since the industrial age of this country, our health has declined massively. Our food looks better, smells better, tastes better, but it's completely nutritionally bankrupt. And so getting back to good farming methods, you're seeing that in our government now. They're trying to push more regenerative type farming methods, which in my opinion is just the old school way of farming.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was the standard.
Yeah, right. So it's just getting back to the basics here and it really simplify. What does simplify mean? Just means to remove the unnecessary, and getting back to that, I think is and we're on our way, but it might be a slow, painful process. But I think people are shifting to that direction.
Well, no pain, no gain. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So, we all know how that goes. All right. You know what? This is a little out of left field. And if you haven't heard of this guy, then I'll move on quickly. Are you aware of Brian Johnson?
I've heard that name.
So Brian Johnson, he's a tech billionaire. I forget exactly what happened, but he had some tech and he sold it. He's got billions of dollars. So he's basically committed now his whole life. I think he's in his upper 30s now. But since he made his billions, since he made his fortune, he's committed his whole life to basically becoming a science experiment, and he wants to live forever. That's what he's trying to do. He wants to live forever. And I'm a guy that's really into health and fitness, so I follow this stuff. And when he first emerged, some of the things that he was doing were extremely unorthodox, and you'd probably never think about doing these things yourself, like swapping blood with his child. I think at one point he might have even been drinking his own urine. I just crazy stuff like that, right? Well, after a couple of years of this, I'm looking back at it and I'm saying, you know what? He comes off like a crazy person, and you know what? Maybe he is, but I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I could make the argument that he's actually doing more for modern science and testing in health and human health than I've ever seen from the actual medical institutions. He's literally using his body for science. He's showing the test results. He's showing what he's doing. He's gotten a pretty good results so far, at least according to the things that he's producing. Why don't we see more of that? Why don't we see more of like, hey, here's what we tried. Here's what worked. Here's what did it. It feels like we just get told this is what you're supposed to do. And
right.
You're not supposed to ask any questions or look for any information yourself.
Right. Well, the thing is, we have to shift away from the allopathic type model into an epigenetic model. And what he's utilizing is basically a form of epigenetics. I mean, he's putting the body through different stresses and different environments and different things, and the body's going to adapt its physiology to meet that load it's under. That is epigenetics 101. And so giving the body under stresses, like you said, no pain, no gain. Well, there's some truth to that. From a physiological law, we don't grow stronger by just sitting around. We have to, put it through adversity. We have to put it through challenges, and the body will grow stronger. I mean, people that have osteoporosis, we're like, hey, what do you want to do? Weight bearing activity, help the body adapt its physiology to meet that load it's under, so you can grow stronger and increase that bone density. So the body, I view it. There's a time and place for absolutely allopathic and surgery and drugs and everything, but they can be life-saving, absolutely. But we're neglecting the true wellness paradigm. We have to get in that wellness paradigm, and it's like the wilted plant, that sits under the sun. How many doctors would look at that wilted plant and they say, cut off its leaves, medicate or vaccinate the plant? If you give that plant water, it can be well. And and your body is no different. there might be a time and place for surgery, there might be a time and place for drugs, and there might be time to change the chemical composition of the soil. But really, we need to give the body what it needs, and it can be well. And really, I believe that, and the cause of all disease is the body's inability to comprehend itself or its environment. And there's one cure in disease, and that's the body's ability to heal itself. And really, there's only one thing any physician can do for that patient, and that's really to remove the obstruction to healing, and thus facilitating it. And so, giving the body what it needs, we can be well. And I firmly know that your body's ability to heal and to be well and to overcome diseases is far greater than our government and Fauci and Bill Gates has permitted us to believe.
We mentioned the obesity epidemic, and I've got some friends that struggle with weight. I try to be a positive influence, and I know it's hard, right? You want to be a little sensitive to it, but you also, you care about them. And so it's like, it's like, what is the right message to get them to understand how important it is? What is having a bunch of extra weight on your body? What is an obese body? What kind of strain and stress does that put on your body, and eventually, I think, shortens your lifespan? What kind of things can you look at and say, hey, look, I love you, but if you don't start to take this weight issue seriously, you're doing serious harm to your body. You're shortening your life. What can we do to kind of get that message purveyed to people that maybe we know are struggling with weight, to try to get them to understand, hey, we care about you, and your current obesity problem is going to do long-term damage if you don't address it?
Well, it is a known fact that it will shorten your life. It's not a matter of if it will shorten your life. It will. It is a fact. It'll shorten your life. Do you want to live long and healthy? Then we have to lose the weight. We have to be proactive here. Obesity affects every element of your life. It affects every element in physiology, from a hormonal standpoint to a structural standpoint, from a neurological standpoint. It affects everything. It affects your energy levels. It affects you on a cellular level. And so, it affects every joint. So many patients come in because they're in pain, and a lot of the times their weight bearing joints can't take the weight anymore. Think about this. I mean, I used to be about 60 pounds heavier than I am now, and I was in constant pain all the time. I had low energy. I had heartburn all the time. I had headaches all the time, and I changed my ways, and now I'm healthy. All that went away. And I really attribute that to a lot of the weight that I was carrying. But, there is a massive epidemic of obesity in this country. And again, it's a hormone imbalance. There's, when we have constant insulin spikes, it's not the fat in our foods, it's the sugar. The sugar will stimulate insulin, and insulin is the fat producing hormone. And so, we constantly have these insulin spikes through snacks and sugars, and especially this time of year. We need to value what we put into our body and look at food as medicine. And there's a saying out there that food can be the best forms of medicine or the slowest forms of poison. So we need to really value where our food comes from. We need to know our farmer, and we need to really put good food in the body. Food is fuel, and view it as that, but we eat because we're bored, because we have this addiction to these bad sugars or bad salts. And the food industry knows this. They know that that food can be highly addictive, and that more people are stressed now than ever before. I mean, when we say 80% of Americans are suffering with a chronic disease, those people are under high amounts of stress, physically, chemically, emotionally, spiritually, and it does affect them. And so we need to get back to the roots here and going back to the basics and simplifying. I'm going to be a broken record here, Owen, but simplifying health and wellness, and to remove the unnecessary. Again, it's the key to wellness, and it's the key to longevity, and it's the key to being well.
And I want everybody to be healthy. I feel like somebody that isn't trying to help you pursue the best health, it's like they're out to get you. I don't know. It feels very unnatural, like in a very like law of the jungle competitive way, if you don't want your friends and family around you to be healthy. I don't know if that translates or makes sense to you. But to me, that's kind of how I interpret it. It's just like, yeah, I want to beat you. I want to beat you in a video game, so I'm not going to tell you where the turbo button is, so I'm running faster than you. It's like, no, I want all my friends to be able to play in the fair game here. I want everybody to succeed. So that's kind of a different take on things. But we see these injections and these drugs. I'm more of an old school method, and we can even talk about fasting. But I'm more of an old school method. I say, look, you got to do it the hard way. And maybe there's some shortcuts that you might need or you might want. And okay. But I'm like, put in the work, put in the exercise. And quite frankly, yeah, you're gonna have to fast. You're gonna have to eat a lot less. You're gonna have to let your body shed that in a natural way. But what of these injections? What of these drugs? Because I know you guys have a competitive product at the wellness company that we can talk about too. But what of these different injections and drugs that people are taking to try to lose weight right now? And then why did you guys feel like you had to have a competitive product on the market?
Well, basically, like you said, injectables and, Ozempic's got a bad rap, all these different things out there. And a lot of these injectable peptides to lose weight. Yeah, they're effective and they can work. So the Wellness Company has a drop peptide that's going to help lose weight. It's an effective peptide orally. So you don't have to, any injectables are going to be in there. It's something that, again, it's, it's hitting the market. Because there's no reconstitution that needs to happen. There's no needles here. It is literally just a oral peptide, and it's basically cased in the MCT oil. It's something that has been effective, and it's much safer than Ozempic. It's better than Ozempic, and it's going to be something that it is a peptide. So I think it's safe. And again, I don't like needles. And this is something that I would recommend over any injections.
What is it called? I don't just not like needles. I have like a fear of needles. I forget what the phobia is called. I have like a fear. I can't do it. I can't. I don't think I could ever get a tattoo. I could never. Needles, keep them away from me. Even when I've had a couple oral surgeries. I think it was a root canal or something. My last oral surgery. The doctor's about to put the pain killing needle, and I'm like, doctor, no. I'm like, I can't do it. He's like, you're insane. He's like, I'm literally about to rip a tooth out of your head or grind your tooth down to the bone. He's like, you want this? And I'm like, doctor, no. I'm like, I can't. You don't understand. Whatever the fear I have of needles is overwhelming of the pain. And so I have these oral surgeries without the needle injections. They'll put the topical stuff on me just to give me a little relief. But I'm the same way as far as needles are concerned. Let me ask you this about fasting though. Are you a proponent of fasting? Do you think it has health benefits?
I love fasting. I absolutely am a advocate for fasting. I think that, the longest fast I've ever done was a 10-day water fast.
Wow.
And so it's very powerful. Things happen. You realize a lot of things about yourself. You realize how hangry and irritable and angry you can become. A lot of emotions will come out.
Isolate yourself when you're on day 5, or what are we talking?
Yes, totally. And you realize how addictive these food commercials can be, especially when you're on like day 7, day 8 of the fast, and how your body is craving these fats, and you almost want to lick the burger on the food commercial, and it's but again, it goes to show you how addictive these foods are, but and how addictive we are to these foods. But I love fasting. Fasting is one of the most powerful and underutilized ways of helping the body detoxify, to help the body really cleanse itself. There's a spiritual component to fasting, which I recommend reading about in the Bible, but there is very powerful things in my life, and I fast all the time. I love intermittent fasting. I endorse intermittent fasting as well. That can really help the body lose weight as well on a natural side, but can help stimulate a healing. I've done a 14-day juice fast, and I had debilitating shoulder pain. And about day 10 of that fast, my shoulder just started aching tremendously. And then it ached for about 2 or 3 days, and then boom, all that pain went away. And I think it was my body was healing during that fast. So there's really powerful things that happen, and we have to look at systemically how draining, when we eat food, systemically, it's very draining on the body, especially these processed foods. I mean, I had, fast food in my old office on the shelf, and it sat there for, it's like 15, actually it was from 2009. And it's still there. It doesn't look moldy, doesn't smell. And that food looked like it was bought the day prior. And so that food isn't breaking down after, how many years, 17 years now. What is that doing to your body? and so those types of food are full of preservatives, and they're designed to stay on the shelf for a very, very, very long time. That means it's going to be very, very difficult for the body to break these foods down. Again, going back to understanding the foods are so designed to look better and smell better, taste better, but again, it's nutritionally bankrupt. So yeah.
Well, and I would say from my experience with fasting, because it is a difficult thing, especially if you're going to do it for the first time, but there's ways to make it easier. From my experience, the best way, this is my number one way to fast, is just be so busy you don't have time to eat. That's the best way. Like today, I got up, I made a pot of coffee, and I was immediately getting to work. I'm going to be on air probably till about 7 or 8. I'm going to go to the gym. So I'll probably, not even intentionally, I'll probably basically fast all day and then eat before bed, which is not ideal, but I'll be starving. So it's just, just stay busy. And then you won't even realize you're hungry until your body finally comes to rest. But the other thing too, you mentioned, it's like, why would that impact my shoulder? Or how could that improve something else in my body? Because here's what happens. Like you said, the body is basically, it's a divine machine, and it has an operational capacity. And so if you're eating all of this junk food, which by the way, like you said, gets you addictive, once you start eating healthy food, those cravings will eventually go away. But if your body is busy digesting all of these bad foods, then it can't address a shoulder issue or a knee issue or something else. So all of a sudden, your divine mechanical body here, this part isn't having to work as hard. So guess what? It can use some operational capacity over here, or maybe back here, or somewhere else. So there's so much science behind that. I think it is very important, but have a strategy going in. I would say have a strategy going in, and then from my experience, it differs with different people. But it's like you're gonna have a period of time where it's like you feel like you have to eat, like you're starving and your stomach is growling, and you feel like you can't go on, whatever. But then it's like once you kind of leap that hurdle, the other side of it is a lot easier, and
Yep.
then you can really get into the fast and the results. So I'm glad to hear you're a supporter of it. I totally agree. Dr. Ben Tapper, we are out of time for today. Hey, he's back on X, though. You can find him there at Dr. Ben Tapper 1, at Dr. Ben Tapper 1. Don't forget to support our friends at the Wellness Company as well, folks. So many great products there for you, including they can deliver beef to your house. What? The Wellness Company? What can't they do? They can do it all. TWC.health/Owen. We appreciate our friends over there for sponsoring the show. We appreciate Dr. Ben Tapper's time. We wish him a Merry Christmas. Any final words for the audience, Doctor?
Yep. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're struggling with any kind of illness or diagnosis, the rule is do not become your diagnosis. There's always hope, and hope is the most powerful drug there is. And if you got anything out of this talk, just remember that your body's ability to be well is far greater than anyone has ever permitted you to believe. God bless you, and thanks again.